I'm the regional guy. What you've talked about so far, you've gone through various parts of the treaty, and you will continue to do that in one sort of process. The two of the three talks that I'm giving are based on regions. One's the Arctic Ocean, that's my morning one today, and later on this week I'm going to talk about the South China Sea. So I'm kind of looking at things and kind of what's happening in particular regions where they have applied or are applying law of the sea, and more particularly where particular law of the sea types of issues come up. So I won't be looking too much at technical detail regarding the treaties, although I can do that as well. And as a Canadian who's actually never been to the Canadian Arctic, I've been to the Norwegian Arctic, and I've been to the Finnish Arctic. That's a land Arctic. Finland doesn't have an ocean Arctic. But I've not actually been. It's really hard to get to the Canadian Arctic. It's really expensive. There's very few people who live up there. So there's people here, like Larry Mayer and some others, I expect, who have a lot more experience in the Arctic, the actual being in the Arctic. I don't really like the cold all that much, to be honest. It's cold and it's dark half of the year. So it doesn't appeal to me from that point of view. As an area of law of the sea, it appeals to me a whole lot. Now, I say as a Canadian, Canadians always have to start every Arctic talk with a polar bear. Why? It's a law. I can't get back into my country. So somebody will have to sign a little thing saying, yes, he showed a polar bear. And I'll be allowed back into Canada. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit, at least, is a little bit of a general background on some of the Arctic issues as to why anyone cares, and why why this become, starting really in about 2007. Before that, no one really cared much about the Arctic. In 2007, it all changed. And so there's Arctic conferences that Larry and I go to and other people go to. We've made a whole career over the last 8 or 9 years going to Arctic Law of the Sea conferences. Before that, there was no career at all. I was just a happy little professor in Victoria, minding my own business. And then the Arctic sort of blew up and created a whole lot of issues. Anyhow, I'm going to talk. But before I talk too much, what do you want to know? Well, it helps me to talk if I know what you want to know. If you say, I don't want to know anything, then we just all go lunch. But I get paid by the word. So, I mean, you're going to have to buy me lunch. That's the deal, okay? If you don't ask questions here now, some kind of reasonable question, then you're going to have to buy me lunch. And I'm skinny, but I eat a lot. Okay? So think about that. Now, I had talked to somebody earlier about who's going to ask me that first question. But I'll leave them off and let them do their thing, let them sit. So, I see a hand over here. No? But I'm going to, okay. What do you want to know?
Okay, I would like to know about enforcement.
None. Next.
What question are you going to ask for the exam?
Well, I don't know about that yet. Enforcement in what context?
So how do you deal with it? I know that it's not very well developed still. How would you like to?
Enforcement in the Arctic, in some respects, is no different than it is in any other part of the law of the sea. Okay, so it's the same sort of problems.
What about comparing with Antarctic regime?
Yeah, that's a good question. Antarctic regime is completely different because it's land covered around water, right? And you have the Antarctic Treaty from 1959, which is a very, very specific and absolutely bizarre, an absolutely bizarre treaty. Okay, you could never enter into that treaty now.
That's true, but that's the only other pole we have.
I understand that, but that doesn't mean that they're the same. So you look at the Antarctic Treaty and how the Antarctic Treaty works, and then you look at, which is the land, essentially surrounded by water. In the Arctic, you have the water surrounded by land. The difficulty with that is, I would argue, in the Antarctic Treaty, where what they did is they froze all the claims, and everybody kind of just agrees to get along on the land. Kind of hard to do in the ocean when you already have the Law of the Sea Convention. And the Arctic was kind of thought about. And there was an understanding in the time of the convention that the Law of the Sea Convention actually applied to the Arctic. Now you can disagree with that all you want, and that's okay. I disagree with it on Tuesdays. But it's Monday, so I don't disagree with it today. But what's happened is the countries themselves, the Arctic 5 in particular, have basically made it incredibly clear through a declaration, not legally binding, doesn't really matter, but where the Arctic 5, which we're talking about the United States, we're talking about Canada, we're talking about Greenland, Denmark, we're talking about Norway, and we're talking about the Russians. Now, why would I say the Russians like that to do with the Arctic? I don't have a good map. I need good maps. Okay. Why would I say the Russians about the Arctic? And I will do that consistently. I don't think they've acquired a large area, but yeah, they're the big Arctic state. The rest of us are dilettantes. The rest of us, we're up there. Canada has a couple of, we have, 2 vessels that can actually go to the Arctic, and even then they break down. The U.S. has 1, I think, and 1 polar icebreaker. We won't talk about the submarines. That's off limits. But most of the rest of the vessels really, but the Russians have nuclear-powered icebreakers. They can do stuff in the Arctic. Right? That's what, and they have the biggest, if you look, your geography here. Where is Russia today? Oh, there it is. So yeah, Russia's got a huge area, so they have a large expanse of the Arctic. Canada, we run around the world thinking, hey, we're an Arctic state, but we're not. We've got hardly any people living in the Arctic. Why? We have very little capacity to do anything in the Arctic when it gets right down to it. It's the Russians. Hence, when I talk about the Arctic, when you go to look at what's happening in the Arctic, well, I'm going to talk about Canada stuff because that's what I know the best. Nevertheless, the big Arctic state is the Russians, okay? And the Russians, that's why I leave them. So the Arctic 5, the Russians, one last time, I'll stop doing it, it gets annoying after a while. And the Canadians, the Americans, and all the other people. They basically got together and said, hey, look guys, we understand that the European community, God love them, have their own views of the world. And they were kind of thinking there was stuff in the European Parliament, well, the Antarctic Treaty, maybe that should apply up there. And the Arctic 5 basically made a statement, no, the Law of the Sea Convention applies in the Arctic Ocean. Okay, so that's not the Antarctic issue. There is some interesting enforcement stuff that's possible in the Arctic, and I'll come back to that in a second. Sir, you got your hand up?
Yeah. What has been researched about the availability of the resources in the Arctic, and what are the priorities?
Sorry, what's it? Come again?
What are the priorities right now for doing research in the Arctic?
For research?
Yeah, for research and for the availability of the resources.
And the availability of the resources. Well, the research is, Larry can answer that better than I can, but there has been a lot of research that's been done in the Arctic, but not nearly enough and on almost anything to do. And that would include, particularly in the North America, even on the land, in terms of the amount of research that's been done. So there's an incredible need to do more research on just about everything, from fisheries that Thomas talked about, to almost anything else you can imagine. Even just currents, salinity, all the issues. There's a big gap in what is known about in the Arctic Ocean that's quite specific. And the reason for that is it's a really hard and really difficult environment to work in. Right? Larry lost a whole year up there stuck on a vessel in an ice floe. And he didn't get out. He hadn't seen his children for a whole year because he got stuck in the middle of the earth. He got stuck there, right? It's a difficult. In the summer, it's not so bad because you can manipulate and you can move. But in the winter, you can't work there. And you go back historically, the Russians have a huge storehouse of research. The Russians have done the most research as well. Back in the day, one of the things, they don't do it so much now, but they would have ice floes, and they would put camps, research camps, on ice floes. And the ice floes would move. And they would, sort of move around the Arctic, and this was an interesting sort of research thing.
The Arctic 5 have defined priorities for research, or?
Not really, no. Not the Arctic 5, no. Not in that sort of way. Go ahead.
If I can just add, there is a task force and there will be an agreement within the Arctic Council on
Yeah.
cooperation and scientific research.
Yeah.
And that is, to reply to your question, is that, in realizing all the gaps for scientific research in the Arctic, you need the cooperation, and the Arctic Council was signed. It's not signed yet, but they
Well, no,
it's-
because
they
there's
almost-
different, there's problems about whether it'll be a treaty, whether it'll be a declaration. And once again, the Russians have views, okay, on this. And Arctic cooperation in terms of research, you know, it gets into the marine scientific regime, resources, marine scientific research regime that's in the law, the Sea Convention, concepts of consent to do research in your 200 nautical mile zone, potentially under continental shelf. So it gets quite complicated. A lot of the research does take place in the Arctic, at least amongst the non-Russian states. There's been a lot of it that's been cooperative, right? Because the Swedish have a really, forget the name of the vessel, but Yeosu, that has a real research capability. I got invited to a conference by my friend Larry there he was how many degrees north or south of the North Pole off the vessel. He's an American/Canadian. So there's a lot of research that goes on. Canada and the United States cooperate a lot in research. The Danes and the Canadians, when we're talking to each other, cooperate a lot in our research, particularly to do with the continental shelf back in the day, to do with the extended continental shelf. So as for resources, we're talking about ocean resources. We have several. Within the 200 nautical mile zones, it's unclear exactly what resources there are. There certainly appear to be in the Russian side. There are natural gas fields at least, and potentially oil fields. The United States, as we know, has some very close to shore. They've done some work, but once you get further out into the ocean, nobody really knows. Right? No one's done that type of work to find out. When I talk about the Arctic and we say 2007 was sort of the beginning of the story of the race for the resources in the Arctic. Right? And if you read and you type that into your little googly things there, you're going to get race to the resources as sort of a real story for about a decade. And it's all mythology. It's not real. There has not been a race for the resources between the countries or amongst the countries. Okay? Partly because we don't know what the resources are. Now, I'll try and maybe put this into a little bit better context, but is there, in my few minutes, but is there some other question I can deal with? I'm looking over here for some reason. Everybody's happy? Oh, sorry. Good. Who's unhappy? Excellent. I always like unhappy. Shoot.
Well, when we talk about the Arctic resources, what we have to respect the benefits of the group of Inuit.
Yes.
What I mean is that the group of Inuit is the affairs of domestic.
They are domestic.
Yeah. But it seems that in the current situation, the international community of Inuit is an independent organization. It seems it already exceeds the government of a country.
Well, there are international, in terms of multilateral organizations of Inuit peoples that facilitate certain types of movement across borders. I'm thinking here of Finland and Russia, for example, amongst others. And Norway would be a part of that as well. I don't know about Greenland, so I can move that. Not sure. But they're still, the thing about Indigenous peoples and First Nations peoples is they're still national citizens of a country. Right? And so from an international law point of view, while there may be special requirements.
It seems the group of Inuit is more independent than the other citizens of Canada.
No, I wouldn't think so. I don't think they're more independent. I don't know what you mean by independent. They are a group that has special rights under Canadian law. Under Canadian law, they have special rights. Right? But that's not. I would argue not under international law. You can have this gets into a whole area that I want to avoid, like you wouldn't believe. But because it's not a law of the sea issue specifically. But under Canadian law, yes, they have special rights. I can't speak for the other countries, and I won't. Norway has something similar. The Russians, I'm not so sure. The Russians, I'm not so sure. But when it comes to national interests in the Arctic, of course, one of the concerns is the land-based population, and the land-based population has indigenous concerns. Right? There's indigenous peoples. They participate in the Arctic Council in a particular way. The Arctic Council is a non-treaty-based organization that was developed largely for environmental reasons, led mostly by Finland. Canada tries to take credit, but it's mostly Finland. And that body has its, I want to say membership, but it's not a treaty organization. It's sort of an informal organization. It has states, it has permanent participants, which is, so groups of indigenous people sit equal to states in a non-treaty body. And then you also have observers. And observers, like China, for example, is an observer state, and they participate as well in the Arctic Council. There are decisions are made by the Arctic Council, but the Arctic Council being non-treaty based, they have no legal impact. They have no legal effect. The Arctic Council has developed 2 international treaties. Well, it's better to say that the Arctic states, after initiatives within the Arctic Council, went out and then negotiated amongst themselves 2 Arctic-based agreements that do cover all the Arctic. And one is to do with search and rescue, which makes a lot of sense, speaking about search and rescue. And the other is on oil spill pollution issues. So there's 2 different agreements there. Okay? Something else that I can...
Maybe I can just add, there's a difference between the countries in the Arctic with regards to the Inuits. Because, for example, in Greenland, it's the Inuits creating the government. So there's some
there are differences.
Yeah, there's differences. So, but I can...
That's why I stayed away from that and didn't look at her. Looked at you. I just commented only on Canada, and I have a little bit more experience with what the Russians are doing. It's a little less happy kind of situation. As I say, 20 years ago, there wasn't a lot of interest in the Arctic. The Arctic interest, it's not that it wasn't thought about. Countries that are border the Arctic, U.S., Canada, the Russians, of course, the Norwegians, to a lesser extent, but they're still there, and of course Denmark, Greenland, are, always had interests in the Arctic. The rest of the world got interested basically around one incident, and that incident was a Russian submarine, or semi-submersible, not semi-submersible, but a mini-sub that went and put a Russian flag on the North Pole. Whoa! I had visions of some guy or gal kind of planting it like that, but I couldn't guess that on the North Pole, because it's under X amount of water, that would be really tough to do. Yeah, I thought it was on the moon. Anyhow, sort of. But that gal, as only this can do, it appeared as if the Russians were claiming the North Pole as being part of Russia. I don't know. I think if I took a Canadian flag and planted it out there, I don't think anybody would guess that I was trying to claim part of Korea. What it did is it brought a lot of attention to the Arctic. It brought a lot of international attention to the Arctic as to what was going on in the Arctic. So you have that incident, which was pretty minor in the grand scheme of things, and the Russians were not claiming the North Pole by the use of a flag, which is so 18th century, really. The actual technology as to how they did it is quite fascinating, but that aside. And whether it was a government-state action or not is even been debated, because of there was a lot of private money that was involved in that. But what it did is it started this whole narrative of race to the resources. What the countries around the Arctic Ocean were allegedly doing was trying to get as much of the Arctic Ocean under their control as they could. Well, the problem with that tiny bit is that you have to know your Law of the Sea Convention. And if you know your Law of the Sea Convention, in the 1970s, Canada, the United States, Sweden was a little bit later on this, I think, the Russians, of course, Norway, all had 200 nautical mile zones, including in the Arctic. And nobody noticed. So we had 200 nautical miles already in the Arctic. What changed a little bit, and what got everybody's attention, was the outer limit of the continental shelf. and the continental shelf idea, what was going on and what was being claimed, was large parts of the seafloor, ocean floor, beyond 200 nautical miles. But you know now, I think, you know, that that's consistent with the law of the sea convention. So what the Russians did in 2001, they were the first country to actually make a submission to the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf. And in their submission, they had a very large area. I don't think I have a map of it. There you go. No, that's something else. Anyway, I don't have my slides are terrible. They're always from somebody else. They made a claim. They didn't make a claim. So that's the wrong terminology. They indicated where their outer limit of the continental shelf was, and the Russians went right up to the North Pole, and they provided their information to the Commission, which they are entitled to do, as you know. So that was not a race to the resources. Subsequent to that, in 2006 or whatever, the Norwegians did something similar. Denmark in 2013, Canada not yet, and the United States probably not. We don't know. They've got they have all the information, right, Larry?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So eventually the US is going to do something up there. And at the end of the day, there's not going to be based strictly on the law of the sea convention. And the perceptions, at least, of the science. Now, there are different views of the science as to how credible the Russian submission will be. How credible is the Danish submission, which actually also covers the North Pole and covers a whole lot of other areas in the Arctic. So you have on the seafloor, at least, that this is where the race to the resources come from. And it's all mythology. All the countries are doing are what many of your countries are doing as well, which is going to do what? They're looking beyond the 200 nautical mile zone and going and indicating, as they're obliged to do under the convention, to make their case for the outer limit of their continental shelf. And this has been portrayed in the media as if Russia is trying to take the entire Arctic. Now, you can argue about the science around the Russians a little tiny bit. You can argue about the science around the Danes, and if the Canadians ever get their act together, the science around the Canadian. But when you look at all that, one of the things that's absolutely fascinating for me is the amount of cooperation there is amongst the states on these issues. Right? There's been a fair degree of communication between the science communities in terms of some of the data. Not so much data sharing, but certainly idea sharing amongst the countries, including Denmark, of course, and Greenland. So the science community here has been a lot more cooperative than sometimes people tend to think. I use that one because it's sort of who owns it's a cartoon, of course. Who owns the North Pole? You've got one country, you've got the Canadians, the Russians, and you've got the other people over here, collectively the United States or whomever, all sort of trying to figure out where the boundaries are going to be in the Arctic. And maritime boundary delimitation in the Arctic, there's some within 200 nautical miles, but there's nothing beyond 200 nautical miles. But what's interesting here is that the countries have essentially agreed amongst themselves to say, look, we're going to we're going to go to the Commission, we're going to get our zones beyond 200 nautical miles. And you know what? Someday, you and I, it can be Russia for a minute, someday you and I, we're going to get together and talk. And that's what I'm getting at. There's a fair degree of cooperation, or what I would prefer to think of coordination. The countries all understand that there's going to be I don't want to say problem, there's going to be overlapping boundaries in the Arctic at the end of the day. Maybe 10 years, 15 years from now, after all the countries have put their submissions in, everything comes back, and all of the countries are very comfortable with that. They say, yes, we know, but let's not worry about that today. And you watch carefully all the conversations in public, and for those of us who have access to private, that's in private as well, and that's the understanding amongst the states. So when you look at the Arctic, this race for the resources, and this huge conflict, and there are conflicts, don't get me wrong, but not on this issue. It's been more one of coordination, cooperation. Canada and the United States in particular, we've done our research together. Larry's boat goes first. The Canadian, because of the way you have to break the ice, Larry's vessel goes first. The Canadian vessel goes second. He's also a Canadian, so he never knows which vessel he's on. But his vessel goes second because of the way they're gathering data. The data will switch. Then it'll be the Canadian will go first, and the American will go second. We're supposed to be, in disagreement on boundaries in that area, and we are. But it hasn't inhibited the science cooperation. There has been, as I know, and I suspect you know, a lot of cooperation there was for a while between Denmark and Canada as well on data. And there's been some cooperation with the Russians amongst the science, because there's been scientific, regular meetings, A5 in a different context, of the science community to do with the country. So all the message here, at least as regarding the seafloor, is actually a pretty good message. This is a region where the states are, for the most part, cooperating, for the most part, coordinating their actions so as to not to get in each other's way. Now this may end up with some dispute problems someday, but not in the near future. Not in the near future. The Law of the Sea Convention does apply up there. I think that's the number one message that people sometimes miss. But the Law of the Sea Convention doesn't really have very much about the Arctic. There's nothing except for one provision. There's only one provision in the entire convention that is specific to the Arctic. And that has to do with shipping. Well, let me stop there for a second because I've got to run out of words here. Is that okay? Clear enough? Questions, sir?
Yeah. Prof, I want to ask you this question. This temporary agreement that is happening between these Arctic states, don't you think in the near future it will still more problem? Because for me, I believe since the Arctic area, the resources, they have little information to where they are located in terms of assessment. Don't you think in the near future, when they have access to these resources, the problem will be more?
Well, it may be more in the future. My query back is that the future is probably...
Handle the future can handle that?
Well, eventually. All countries handle their boundary disputes. Right? Now, they don't always be happy boundary disputes, but keep in mind in the Arctic, the big boundary that people would think, what about the U.S.? What about the U.S. and the Russian? They've already got their boundary. All the way back in 1990. What? So they've got their boundary. So the Russians and the U.S., they've already resolved all their boundary problems in the Arctic. It's just the rest of us. Okay. Yeah, it could be an issue in the future, but you're looking well beyond 200 nautical mile zones. Right? You're looking way out there in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. It's going to be a while, if at all, that there's going to be a significant problem out there, other from a resource point of view. Now, there may be some political issues that arise for one reason or another, but from a strictly resource point of view, it's going to be a while before that becomes what I call a hot issue. Okay?
Because since they have agreed now to put efforts together in order to survey and quantify maybe the resources of the area, so I was just thinking that it is better now if recommendations will be made because they are just few states.
Sure.
Yeah, than leaving it to the future.
Well, I think the Commission will make the recommendations they need to make. But I don't think the states are going to be doing it in the short term. And when I say short term, I mean until all the recommendations are done. I don't think that the states are going to be looking too much at bilateral negotiation. And I'm being careful here because I know there's some discussions within 200, okay, but beyond 200. Again, looking at my image right here. I know both. We'll work it out someday. But beyond 200, there's not a lot of discussion that's gone on. And I don't think the countries are really seeing that as a problem to be resolved today, I would say. I see that. I see that, my standard approach to this is the worst case scenario is that Canada has a new neighbor. They're going to have a boundary with their Russians someday. Canada always sends Christmas presents to all its neighbors. We just had one more Christmas present. We got to send it to the Russians now. That's all. Yeah.
But also I think, the Arctic states has an interest to show governance of the Arctic because outside the Arctic, a lot of states have huge interest in the Arctic Ocean. So I think that could mean that in the future, even though there will be, of course, some disagreement, I think the states have an interest to show strong leadership, and I think that's a key role here. And the key message that, even though there will be some disagreement, they need to stand together because there's a huge pressure from non-Arctic states already going on. So I think maybe I'm too optimistic.
No. I would take it a little bit differently and view it a little bit differently. But it's a good point. I mean, there's a lot of people who watch the Arctic. A lot of people, and then I say states who watch the Arctic, right? Part of the concern of the Arctic states themselves is to, try and look after their interest, but also show some regard. But I mean, look at the countries up there. Canada. When was the last time we did anything bad? Denmark. They've never done anything bad, right? They make Legos. How can you get anything wrong with Legos, right? And the Russians are interesting. Okay, the Norwegians. Have you ever met a Norwegian you didn't want to take to dinner? Preferably they pay if it's in Norway because it's really expensive. So just a tip. But these countries are countries that get along fairly well, and they have a whole history there. And even with the U.S. and the Russians, with the Russians in the Arctic, there's been a lot of cooperation that doesn't necessarily exist elsewhere. I would say. Larry, you had a comment?
It was just a comment that with respect to resources, I think most of the Arctic states know that most of the resources, the big resource, oil and gas, are actually within the 200-mile EEZs. There's very little beyond that. We don't kind of advertise that when we're trying to get support for going out and surveying. But that's the reality. So it's mostly within the EEZ issue.
These are resources that we are currently aware of, and then what I mean by, and we're usually thinking oil and gas. There's other things that we just really don't know. As Larry can tell you, the number of core samples, and what I mean by that is stuff that's been taken from the sea floor, dredging and core samples. There's not that much more in the Central Arctic Ocean. There just hasn't been that much done, and it hasn't been done for looking for resources of that type in one form or another. As regards fisheries resources, and I defer, as always, I refer to Thomas Hyder on all the fisheries issues, but even the fish in the middle of the 200 nautical, in that Central Arctic Ocean area, that's going to be a while. One of the problems, and I'm not a scientist, so I will ignore any science comments on this, but it's a food issue. And what my Icelandic colleagues have written about this and said, yeah, you're probably going to have some fish that are around the continental shelf where it's shallow. But when you get in the deep ocean floor, it's really deep. There's not a food source that's there at the present. You might get predators who go to fish out, but if they're not predator fish, then it's going to be a problem. So they look at different stocks as to which might move north and which won't move north. And even then, it's a slow process of one type of thing. But the Arctic, as Thomas said, is changing. Like the ice, I won't go into all the detail, but the ice loss is dramatic and getting more so every year. It is the poster child for global climate change. For countries, and I'm thinking of China just because I've dealt with China, and I say dealt with China, I've been engaged with a number of my Chinese academic and sometimes government contacts on this. And one of the China's stated concerns is weather patterns, and they're right. Because weather patterns are also being influenced by the changes in the Arctic. Getting to and this falls into something you would comment on, I think, is that, the Arctic is not just about the Arctic states, okay? There is a global interest over and above the fact, that some countries just want to come to the Arctic. The Europeans are very interested in the Arctic because they want to save it, and that's a big problem. But there is a legitimate interest in terms of weather patterns and other kinds of issues. There's another little tiny issue in the Arctic that has come up. Again, the Germans were good at this one. And that is the idea that is there going to be any area of common heritage in the Arctic? Okay? The answer is yes. It's clear that there is going to be an area of the Arctic seafloor that is common heritage. The Russians have made that clear. It's an area called Gathel Ridge. I don't know if it shows up in any of my slides. And that's where I need you. There.
Yeah, I'm going to correct you though.
Well, no, I haven't finished.
No, the Russians may have said so, but the Danes have not.
But they haven't gone near a Gackel Ridge, though.
Yep.
They have?
Yep.
I gotta look at that map again. Did they cover it all?
Good part of it.
Dave's not gonna get that.
We'll see.
Okay, I have to look at my maps a bit more carefully. Proof positive that I can be corrected, and I don't know what I'm talking about. Having said that, in the area where I do know what I'm talking about, which is the other outside the Russians, there may be two small, maybe two small areas that might be common heritage, but the betting is that the answer to that will be no. So if there's going to be an area of common heritage, it's going to be a small area in the Gackel Ridge area. So and that's, I think, somewhat, from what I understand, the Russians didn't close it all up, and I didn't actually look at the Danish line carefully enough after I saw the Russian one. I was looking mostly at the Russian, so some homework here to be done there. Okay. Anything else you want to know before we got another 5 minutes? I've got about another 2,000 words. So what else do you want to know? We have some disputes up there. And this is all boundary stuff, and I can talk a lot more in detail about it. But we also have some shipping disputes, and I do want to take this. James will like this because he likes this stuff. There's some navigational dispute issues, okay, between Canada and the United States. And I gotta say, this is one of the most fascinating disputes on Earth. Because neither country really does anything to, Canada spends most of its time on the Northwest Passage trying not to, rile the Americans. And the Americans spend a lot of their time not looking at what the Canadians are doing. So it's an interesting kind of arrangement where we're basically essentially, the countries agree to disagree and don't really want to push this issue in any particular way. But there's you have the Northern Sea Route. You have two ocean areas that are close to the shoreline. And the queries of essentially, in very simple terms, are these international straits through which there can be navigational rights, which I'm sure you've already sorted out. Or are these, according to both Canada and the Russian positions, are these internal waters, historic internal waters, particularly the Canadian perspective? The Russians are always a bit vague on this, but anyway. Are these historic internal waters through which there is no right of passage? And so there's these two areas that always raise navigational issues. And they show up all the time in terms of Arctic disputes. And they are Arctic disputes in terms of navigational rights. And the countries, and I'll just stick to Canada and the United States, and the countries have state their positions, much like Thomas said earlier, with great vigor. That we know the Canadian view is that these are historic internal waters and there is no right of passage. If you want to come, don't bother. Come. We're not going to stop you. Come on down. We're not claiming they're historic waters because we don't want you to come. We just want you to dress like a Canadian. You have to dress like a Canadian and you pay attention to our environmental rules and you can come. So we're not trying to stop anybody. But you also have to call ahead. Permission. And that's what drives the Americans crazy. That's not quite true, but that's the U.S. thing, right? Because the U.S., their vessels, if the U.S. position is, we'll probably follow Canadian law. Why? It's pretty reasonable. It's about safety. They've got ties. What they don't do is call ahead. So it really comes down to a very narrow issue. This is the dispute, but this hasn't arisen all that often between the two countries. But the issue really is, do you in historic internal waters, which we'll probably talk about, instead of trying to see a little bit of time with it. Anyways, at least you're close to shore here. That gives you full sovereignty, right? It's just like the waters out there. They're kind of you're close to shore. You can stop vessels. They have to have permission to come in, basically. And that's the Canadian position. And the U.S. position is, no, these are not historic internal waters at all. This is an international strike, and we do not have to ask permission. For the most part, there's some other disputes, another part of this dispute, but that's the key. And it's largely the same with the Russians, for the most part. Now, there's a whole other overlay of issues regarding the one provision in the Law of the Sea Convention that deals with the Arctic, and that's Article 234. And Article 234, about which James has written extensively, and well, I might add, published in my journal too, so it's a brilliant piece actually. Plug for ocean development and international law. If you want to go find a really good academic journal on oceans. There's a provision that was negotiated between the Canadians, the Americans, and the Russians, and nobody else in the world cared, essentially. And what it does, it gives coastal states in ice-covered waters, whatever that means, special rights to enact marine environmental pollution regulations for vessels. Not only can you enact it, but you can enforce it. And that's what makes the provision really interesting. And it's a unilateral right. In other words, Canada can do it. Canada has done it. We've enacted the legislation. Whether we can enforce it or not, by the way, sir, is whether we can enforce that legislation, don't ask that question. That's very complicated. The answer is probably not. But but it's an interesting provision. It's the only provision in the convention that allows a country, a state, in the specific context of the Arctic, to unilaterally impose conditions on vessels to do with, again, what those conditions can be, but they can include certain types of vessel structures. We think we can, be careful here, we think we can sort of direct routing to a point. There's things that we think we can, I say we being Canada thinks they can do, okay? What they do know for sure is that they, certain parts of their legislation, and the Russians have done something the same, and it's unilateral. In other words, the International Maritime Organization, which is where you would normally go for these things, and MARPOL and SOLAS and those conventions, this is a right that a coastal state has as an Arctic state. Now, just exactly how far those rights go is something that James and I would probably, we would differ only because he would have an American view, I have a Canadian view. The nice thing about some of these disputes between Canada and the United States is that we could switch positions. I can give you the American view, about as good as James can, and he can give the Canadian view, about as good as I am. We've done that at one conference. We just switched sides to give the arguments. That's a navigational issue. It is not. In the case of the Northwest Passage, it's more about optics than reality. A, there's not that many vessels that go through there anyways. B, Canada and the United States have found ways since 1970. It's only arisen as an actual problem once, and that was by accident in 1985. And the rest of the time, Canada and the United States sort of agree to disagree. Well, we don't push, neither country has ever pushed the issue that hard. And that's kind of where we're at. The Russians is a little bit different. But the Russians, the claim of the Russians in the Northern Sea Route is a little more complicated too. It's partly historic waters at some of the time. It's partly Article 234, other parts of the time. So it's not as clear cut in that sort of area. Okay. Any questions on that? Keeping in mind, Straits of Malacca, I don't know how many vessels go through the Straits of Malacca in the run of the day, but it's a lot. And you can count about 125 vessels that have gone through the Northwest that we know of. Maybe submarines out. About 125, 145. I don't know what the number is, I'm making it up, but it's that magnitude, okay? That have gone through the Northwest Passage in a complete transit without stopping. Because once you stop, then you lose your passage rights. Once you get stuck in the ice. You lost your passage. Okay? Now, I have lots of other Arctic stuff to say, but I am conscious of the fact that we had a long morning. I've now used up my words. My problem is that I do have to take 2 more questions. James writes down how many questions I have, and he buys me beer if I get just the right number of questions, and I desperately need a beer. So I need 2 more questions about the Arctic. Sir, you had your hand up, I saw it. What do you want to know? You're good. Where are you from?
Seychelles.
Yeah, you're right. Not a lot of Arctic stuff there. You're out of the pool. Somebody else? Thank you.
Are there any considerations, like, in terms of climate change and the issues that they're going to see about sea level rise and all these considerations about other countries like seashells and stuff about
Well, some of the issues are very, very different than the seashells. One of the big issues about global climate change isn't an ocean issue, but it's permafrost, right? Because when you're up in the high Arctic, high Canadian Arctic, high Russian Arctic, you've got basically frozen Earth that goes down X amount of space. It's called permafrost. As global climate change has changed that permafrost, so you built buildings on the understanding that that what you were building into was I don't want to say ice, but ground that has been frozen essentially. And when it stops freezing, then the building becomes very unstable. So I mean that's not an ocean issue except when it's near the coast. But it's a major problem that's developing in Canada and the United States. And I actually don't hear any of it in Russia, but that's not a subject area that I spend much time listening to. I assume it's the same in Greenland.
Also, a huge coastal erosion issue.
Coastal erosion, yeah.
But it's separate from the permafrost issue.
Yes.
It's when the ice recedes, the seas get very high.
That's right.
And it is undermining the coast tremendously.
It's choppy.
A number of communities have already had to move.
It's worth noting that when we talk about the ice receding, when we talk about the ice leaving, we're talking about the summer season, okay? We're not talking about the winter. Because if the ice leaves during the winter, I think we've got global problems that are far bigger than the Arctic, right? But so we're talking about, when people talk about ice receding, they're mostly talking about the summer. Now, there are some other implications. We have reduction in multi-year ice, because historically a lot of the ice in the Arctic has been there, it becomes very dense and very hard, so multi-year ice of one type. So we're losing that, and we're losing the summer cover recently, which is opening up the possibility of shipping. If I could go into the reality of shipping, but I won't do that. So there are significant changes that we're watching and we're seeing over the last couple of years. One more and I'm out of here. Yeah?
You mentioned the cooperation is possible in this area.
Yes.
Do you have any specific idea about the cooperation method those states can employ? Because it's difficult to have a deeply tested by governments for this area. So is there any, pattern looking for?
Well, it depends on what topic you want to talk about in terms of, you have regional seas arrangements in other parts of the world that could work there. I think there's some problems with that. I think the Arctic is kind of a unique area with a unique history, which is interesting, of a certain amount of cooperation that you don't find in other parts of the world. And one of the reasons, in my opinion, is that you do rely on the other state. Right? We all rely on the Russians because they have capacity. We all rely on the Greenlander in Denmark because they have capacity. We all rely on the Canadians because they may be the closest. We rely on the Americans, but no one remembers why. We remember. Sorry. We rely, in that environment. When you are up there either in shipping and off the land, you do have a lot of reliance on whoever's there to help. And a lot of the agreements have been a bit of a search and rescue, a bit of a recognition that this is a unique kind of area in terms of the countries actually have to sort of get along. And one of the classic examples is when, I forget where, somewhere in Alaska they had food problems because there was huge ice offshore, and the only way they could get food into that, you could do it by air, but the only way they could get food and fuel in there was to get a Russian icebreaker to help. So when you get up in the Arctic, you are very much in ways that probably don't exist in other. And there's a Cold War history, don't get me wrong, that has, North America and the Russians like this, but right at the moment things are fairly comfortable. Yeah.
About those boats that are opening in the ice or exploring for oil, have any considerations taken for the new technology, trials and everything to avoid anything?
Yeah, I mean you don't send up a vessel that's been spending all this time in the Bay of Bengal for the sake of argument. You don't send it to the Arctic. Okay? Not so smart. Right. A lot of the vessels icebreaker stuff are built here in Korea, oddly enough. A lot of them in Russia as well. The oil platforms that they use in Russia, just offshore, have ice deflectors, amongst other things. So countries, again, I want to go back. And countries are countries that are reasonably responsible about the environment. Again, Russia maybe less so, but you look at the other states, and Canada does try to be responsible about the environment, right? I mean, we're not an outlaw state this week. So there's concern when you do anything in the Arctic, and you have shipping that goes up in the Arctic. The problem with shipping it, if something goes wrong, it's very difficult to fix. But I would say that's the same about any. It's an oil tanker. Once an oil tanker spills its guts, which is not a very nice term, but once the oil's in the water, there's very little you can do about it. You get your photo of the oily bird, and everybody goes crazy. But the idea is to make sure it doesn't get in the water. It's the same in the Arctic. Nobody wants an environmental. At the same time, countries have an interest. Right? They have an economic interest in resource development, and if that involves the Arctic, it'll be done to the extent it is possible and reasonable. But the idea that the countries should be told they cannot go after the resources, as long as they go after it in a responsible way. Again, look at the countries you're talking about. The fossil exception Russia and the other fours are going to do it in a reasonably responsible manner. But the idea of just saying you can't do it, what if they did? Somebody comes and tells your government you can't do it.
States are responsible.
The national governments, for the most part. There's some international regulations that are out there. But it is the national governments that do most of the serious regulation. There's agreements on all sorts of different things. But they're that apply in different ways. So it's not an area that there's a lack of regulation. There's a lack of coordination of regulation to some extent, in some activities. Yeah. I see your hand on that.
So I have a question actually. In your opinion, is there any lesson of the thing in the South China Sea to learn from?
No, that was easy. Not a whole lot, actually. I mean, I've got a whole slideshow on South China Sea, Arctic Ocean. I've spent more of my career in the South China Sea. It's warm. It's warm. I found that out early. I spent more of my career in the South China Sea, going all the way back to the 1980s. Than I have looking at the Arctic. Actually, there are some lessons, but not in the same way. No, the two areas are radically different. Now, there's some things you can draw, but I always kind of, what do I do? I kind of, oh God, not that conference again. South China Sea and here. There's not a lot of commonality.
Yeah, I know that. But any lesson.
Oh yeah, there's some. There's some. Let's just get along. Beer.
I know this is a lot about the Arctic, but what about the South Pole? Is there anything?
He asked that earlier. The
Oh.
South Pole's a land thing.
Okay.
I don't do land.
Oh.
I can do land, but I won't today. Going once. Going twice. Nobody from over here.
Oh, I have.
Thank you. Bless you.
It's about the Arctic Council.
Yeah.
So, is there any situation where you could issue a binding decision, or do they have to issue recommendations or something, and then the states would get?
Yeah, the Arctic Council, because it's not a treaty-based organization, really doesn't, from an international lawyer's point of view, not really. But the states themselves can, which is what's happened. The states themselves have moved from Arctic Council discussions to binding treaties. I think theoretically the answer is yes, you probably could do it. But I don't think the Arctic Council at the moment is getting into the business because it would change the dynamic. I'm trying to guess what you're going to say. It would change the dynamic a little bit of how the Arctic Council now works. And particularly with the permanent participants who are not states but but actively participate, then you get into some fine lines there. It's my beer money, so you just make it short.
Okay, because that was actually one of my questions, not a question, but I want to add to that. There is a task force of marine cooperation in the Arctic Council at the moment, and actually the negotiation is about some countries would like to see some form of a legal binding body that is able to create marine protected areas, and we talked about marine protected areas earlier, and there's some countries, and I guess some countries is reluctant to do so. So there is a discussion, and and that was actually going to my question, your personal view of the Arctic Council as a legally binding body, because that is the.
I think it undermines the permanent participants.
Yeah, that is.
And that would be, I think, politically and legally, I think that would be a major leap. And I know the U.S. has floated this a little tiny bit while they were the chair, kind of in the background there. Like, I'm not a real Arctic Council specialist, but, around the edges. But I just don't see that happening, because the Arctic Council would have to undergo some remarkable changes. Like, it couldn't operate the way it does now, which is mostly. So I'm not sure the countries are that comfortable with that at the moment. But, I've been wrong about just about every prediction I've ever made in my entire life. So, Fred Soons once went to look through all my articles and everything I predicted. He wrote his own article. Ted was wrong again. Ted was wrong again. He can't predict anything. I'm really good at telling you what the law is today, and I'm really good at telling you what the law was yesterday. I have no idea about the law tomorrow. Meanwhile, I'll talk to you on Wednesday. Have a good day.